Before I show you my game of the day from round 9 of the Tata Steel Masters, let's take a look at the standings going into this round. So, after 8 rounds, on top, Noribek Abdusatorov 5.5 and his compatriot Javakhir Sindarov on 5. So the two Uzbeks out ahead in the tournament. And then there's a chasing pack of Erdomush, the 14-year-old from Turkey, Hans Niemann and Jordan van Foreest on 4.5. So we have 5 rounds still to play and it really is wide open. It's really bunching up after Abdusatorov's loss in the previous round. Okay, well, let's have a look at one of the games. And I've picked the game between Jordan van Foreest and Vincent Keymer. So Van Foreest won the Tata Steel Masters in 2021. He's 26 years old. He's rated over 2,700. Has often quite quirky opening ideas. Quite a creative player. And he's playing Vincent Keymer, who's been just up and down in this tournament. He won his first game very quickly against Giri. But since then, there have been, wins and losses all over the place. But he's made it back to 50%. He's on 4. So let's have a look at this game. Jordan van Foreest playing white against Vincent Keymer. Van Foreest opened with knight f3, and after d5, d4, the game very quickly went into a London system. Keymer plays in one of the most solid ways, bishop d6, so putting the question to that bishop on f4 already. This is a strong piece, so it can be a good idea to exchange it off. For example, if white were to take here, then black could well get in c5, and after knight c6, maybe even e5 as well. The queen is very well placed on d6. So white has to make a decision. What do you do here? Well, you could play knight e5, but there are drawbacks to that move. It's maybe a bit too early. You could drop the bishop back here, or you can leave the bishop on f4, and that's what Van Foreest did. He played bishop d3. Now, Keymer exchanged, so that slightly damages white's pawns. There are pros and cons to playing like this. For white, you get more control over e5 because the two pawns are looking at e5. The downside is that white's centre is a little bit softer now that the pawn has disappeared from e3, so that when c5 comes, it doesn't have quite as much support as the pawn at d4. Okay, let's see how things play out. Queen d6. Attacking the pawn. Queen d2, defending. b6, that's going to prepare c5 so that the b pawn can recapture. And knight c3. Well, the normal square d2 has been taken by the queen, so knight c3, but it could stand quite well on c3. There could be a time when white hassles the queen. c5, yeah, good idea. So looking to just attack white's centre pawn on d4. And I think if white castles here, queenside is very risky, but kingside castling, then I don't think black has too many difficulties here somehow with the attack on the centre. But Van Foreest fairly quickly played h4. So he has these quirky opening ideas. And this certainly challenges black, because black always has to think, well, how far do I allow this pawn to run? Do you block straight away? But if you play h5, then white potentially has the g5 square for a knight, maybe later a queen. Or do you let it run? Well, let's see. Keymer played knight c6, so putting more pressure on d4. It's possible to play bishop b5 straight away, which, if you knock out this knight, then it gives white more control over these squares. And there's an argument for black playing a6 in this position. I know I often criticize this little pawn move at the side of the board, but it makes sense in this position to stop bishop b5 and only then knight c6. Anyway, knight c6 played. h5, the pawn rolls on, and again black has this dilemma. Do you let it roll again, or do you blockade with h6? There are pros and cons to both moves. The disadvantage of playing h6 is that later on white has a hook. White might be able to advance the pawn to g5 and it's easier to open a file. In any case, Keymer didn't touch the king side and played bishop b7. h6, the pawn rolled on. Now, of course, black does not want to take, which leaves this isolated pawn, leaves the rook in play. Not good, so g6. But I have to say, if I were black, I would feel a little bit uncomfortable allowing this pawn to sit on h6, and these squares are a little bit weaker. Wouldn't be my cup of tea. And now bishop b5. Good move. So pinning the knight takes some pressure off the d4 square. And if, for example, pawn takes pawn, then queen takes. And that attacks this one. So that's a little bit uncomfortable already. If king e7, well, not a great square for the king. And then just castles queenside. And you can see that white has very nice control over the d4 and e5 squares. I really like that pawn. Could be very well placed in an endgame, actually. Anyway, after bishop e5, c4 played. And knight e5. That's where the knight belongs, on this beautiful outpost on e5. And this is already, I think, quite an uncomfortable position for black. You can't escape to the queen side because f7 is hanging. Casting king side with the pawn on h6 looks really perilous. So what do? Well, Keymer played an outrageously ambitious move. He played the knight back to g8. So he's preparing to push the knight away with f6. But to retreat like this and to telegraph exactly what you're going to do, it just feels so slow. Van Foreest simply castled queenside. So he's playing very normal, very natural moves. And Keymer continued with his plan, f6, wanting to push that knight away. Now, here is where I would like you to have a think. I'm going to have a drink. White to play. What would you do next? Cheers. Tired of playing bots that either crush you or make silly blunders? Nocti is a chess AI that plays like a real opponent at your own level. Nocti is designed for practice. Just pick your opening and start playing, or let Nocti decide. You get instant colour feedback and puzzles based on your mistakes. Set up any endgame position and prove that you know the technique. Learning through gameplay is so effective. Try it out with Nocti. PowerPlay viewers can receive a 20% discount on Nocti's annual membership if you click on the link in the video description and put in the discount code PowerPlayChess. Right, let's get back to the game. Well, f6. My goodness. This allowed knight takes c4. And this just breaks open the position. Of course, the queen, if the queen goes back, then white is just a pawn up for nothing with a good position. So Keymer thought, right, got to take it. Let's just try and hold out. But with d5, the centre opens. The king is at the end of the e-file, and this is desperate. It really is desperate for black. So there's a pin here, so I mean that has to be taken. And now, I mean, knight takes d5 is interesting, but actually queen e3 check is by far the most accurate move played, I should say. Now, let's just look at black's alternatives here. First of all, okay, the most natural move, in inverted commas, knight e7, just gets ripped apart. Rook takes d5, the queen goes back, and rook d1. Simple chess. You just bring your pieces into the game, and black's king just cannot escape. I mean, rook d8, that gets taken. If the king runs to the king's side, then rook d7, and then, well, here's a funny variation. Rook g7 check. The pawn on h6 comes into play, and of course this is absolutely crushing. For example, I mean, there are many ways to win. If queen e7, of course black would love a queen exchange, but queen h3. Good move, threatening rook e1, threatening knight d5, also preventing queenside castling. I mean, it's hopeless. So Keymer, after 17.5 minutes, played king f8. He realised he was lost here. Rook takes d5, hitting the queen. Queen e7. Of course, white should avoid an exchange of queens, so queen d2. If rook d8, then bishop takes c6. Simply wins back the piece, and yeah, black's king is still stranded. So Keymer played the rather desperate knight e5. That got taken. Bishop takes d5, knight d5. So now from Foreest is only the exchange down, but the initiative continues. Queen is attacked. Queen c5 played. So two pieces attacked, but of course this was planned, and knight f4 is very strong indeed. So a nice fork is threatened, and if queen takes b5, then queen d6 check, and this is absolutely horrible. And knight d5, this is just crushing. For example, and the rook is coming to d1. If knight here, then queen b8 check. I mean, it's just horrific. So let's see. What did Keymer do? He played c3. He's just trying to stir up trouble, but queen d7 is an excellent move. Threatening knight e6 again. Queen e7, and the queen just dropped back to d5. It's all with tempo. Always threats. Queen threatens the rook. And if rook c8, I mean knight e6. For example here, this is not very pretty. Yeah, lots of lovely checks and discover checks. So rook e8 played, preventing knight e6 at least for a move. Bishop takes rook. Pawn takes pawn, and now a really nice winning move. I mean, there are so many winning moves here, of course, but bishop takes g6 is, well, very beautiful and very, very powerful. Of course, can't be taken. That's another nice fork. If the knight is taken, then queen a8 forces a quick checkmate. Again, the pawn on h6 plays its part. And if knight takes, trying to break out, then, well, let's say this. Check, check, and let's go all the way to checkmate. Wow, what an absolutely crushing victory. So it was all over After 26 moves, here is where Keymer resigned. It's interesting, after the game, Van Foreest said, sometimes in classical chess, one overthinks things. I think that's true, you know, in this game. This whole plan of knight g8 was just a bit too clever, basically. You know, I think at some moment around here, he should have compromised. You know, maybe h6. And yes, he's probably a little bit worse, but it's not a disaster. But the way it went, yeah, he tried for too much, and that was the consequence. The king never got out of the middle. Tremendous win by Jorn van Foreest, and that win brings him up the tournament table. So first of all, I should mention that not all. I'm recording this before all the games are finished, but the most important one, Abdusattorov against Sindarov, that ended in a draw. So that means that Abdusattorov has 6, Sindarov has 5.5, and Van Foreest joins him on 5.5 as well. So it's still very tight at the top. Thanks for watching.